missing again.
Street on 20th Avenue. We had two doors that blew out on one side of the house.
I suspect that the incredibly severe weather that blew out the doors has passed you by.
All over.
Lady is right.
Come to our boy!
I got diabetes and all that. What's wrong with the wife?
I'm Governor Charlie Crist. As public officials, each of us has the critical responsibility of ensuring the safety, security, and welfare of our citizens and visitors. And that means it is important that we understand our special role as public officials when disaster strikes. To that end, this presentation provides valuable insights, what to do in an emergency, and perhaps just as importantly, what not to do. My sincere thanks for your service.
There is, perhaps, no more important role you can play than managing your community's expectations. Achieving that, while ensuring a smooth recovery, requires accurate, consistent, and clear messaging. Every public servant needs to be delivering the same message. Making sure this occurs means preparation, planning in advance, meeting and working with your local and state emergency management teams. Fortunately, Florida has one of the nation's most effective and efficient emergency management teams, so you have a wealth of resources to draw upon.
All disasters certainly start local, but as we know, most of our local governments cannot handle a disaster on their own. They're calling mutual aid to their neighbors, maybe even other counties. Here at the state, we can provide all of that for them in a one-stop shopping. We'll provide that mutual aid, that coordination that they need when a disaster strikes. So I think it's important to know that the state EOC is really that support for the county and local government.
Meeting with and learning about the various emergency management teams in your area should be high on your list of priorities. Not only can they brief you on the hazards your community is likely to encounter, they'll also help you understand how and why disaster areas are declared, and how affected communities are reimbursed for damages. They can even help with special training, so you'll have a background in emergency preparedness before you might need it. When disasters strike, they're always local, and that's where the response must begin. You need to be talking with your local emergency management team, and most importantly, your county emergency management director. They're the best and most immediate source of information. They are the first line of coordination with you and other state officials. Reinforce and practice the idea of unified command. One plan, one team with all public messages coordinated. There is nothing more critical than effective, open communications when disaster strikes. If the emergency or disaster begins overwhelming the community, the county can request the State Emergency Response Team, CERT, respond with its capabilities. CERT will then activate to support your operations and provide the National Guard, state law enforcement, FDLE, search and rescue teams, health and medical teams, food and water, and other life-sustaining items and equipment. Do not assume an emergency or disaster automatically means that help from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is on the way.
Well, I think it's critical for elected officials to understand that there is not necessarily reimbursement available to them from the state or federal government. First of all, there's criteria that has to be met. We've had a series of floods over this past 6 and 12-month period where none of those reached the elevation where the federal government was able to come in and help. So I think it's important that when local government calls for help, that they understand and realize they may be on the financial hook for all of that help unless they understand differently ahead of time. Certainly the state will work with the federal government and make sure that we meet all the criteria available so that the federal financial aid comes in. Typically in a disaster, that's 75% federal, 12.5% state, 12.5% local money. So anything that the locals order, they have to understand that they may in fact pay at least a portion of it, and if we're not declared, they may end up paying for all of it. So use caution when asking for mutual aid, but certainly get the resources necessary to save lives and property.
Remember, only the governor can ask the president for federal assistance. And unless the president grants a major disaster declaration for your county, The county may very well be responsible for the costs of food, water, and other local aid. This is regardless of the fact that an executive order may have been issued. In the immediate aftermath of an emergency or disaster, safety, security, and basic human needs are the prime directives. Teams will assess the damage for a possible federal disaster declaration if the damage dictates this is needed. Only then will the recovery phase get underway. If your community has been declared by the President, here are some of the things that might be expected from the government. They range from temporary housing and food stamps to debris removal, emergency protective measures, and direct financial assistance to individuals and families. Whenever local or state emergencies do not reach presidential thresholds, the State Emergency Response Team will work with you to identify available assistance, possibly from other states, specific federal agencies, and private nonprofit organizations. In many cases, loans through the Small Business Association may be available. The governor will request this type of assistance if certain thresholds are met and it has been determined that a disaster declaration from the president is not an option.
Florida's had a lot of practice with emergencies and natural disasters, and we know preparation is essential for surviving and recovering from them. Take advantage of the resources at floridadisaster.org and urge your fellow elected officials to do the same. Also, when the State Emergency Operations Center in Tallahassee is activated for a disaster, there's a resource available to our congressional delegation, legislators, and their staffs to get information on state actions during a disaster. This resource is called the Intergovernmental Relations Team. Located in Tallahassee, this group will answer phone calls, return emails, and keep a web page updated with the latest information on it for the disaster. I hope you'll use this resource when needed. Again, I want to thank you for your support of emergency management and urge you to learn as much as you can before an emergency strikes.